Hello and welcome to a special edition of Mormon Stories podcast. I'm your host, John Dehlin. It is December 28th, 2014. We are in Salt Lake City, Utah, probably Sandy area. And we're very excited to have a live audience of about 120 awesome people. Clap, everybody. And we're here tonight to spend an evening with Clark Johnsen. Clark is a very talented and interesting individual, and he's probably best known for being in the original cast of the Broadway musical, the Book of Mormon Musical. So we're here to talk a little bit about Clark's early years, how he kind of got into Broadway. Then we hope to dig deep on the musical itself. For those of you who haven't seen it, there may be a few spoilers, but we'll try not to ruin the musical for you. But we are going to talk about the musical, and we'll also talk about interesting themes in the musical that relate to Clark's life, and other things that are important to Clark and to our audience. So thank you all so much for coming. Clark, welcome to Mormon Stories.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, well, it's our pleasure. Well, I think it'd be fun to begin like we always kind of begin. Let's just talk briefly about your early years in the church and kind of what the church meant to you.
Well, I think like many young, I think a big part of my narrative is being a gay Mormon. Especially as I reflect on my youth in the church, and there was definitely that. I was raised in a very sort of traditional, very loving, very sort of by the book Mormon home. The family home evening on Monday nights, the very strict Sabbath day observances. There was not a lot of moral wiggle room or ambiguity in my family when it came to living gospel principles. There was very much a feeling of my universe truly was. The universe of my childhood was the universe of the Mormon paradigm.
What city?
We moved about every 5 years from, I was born in California. We lived in Texas for a brief period, moved to Wyoming, moved to Illinois, moved back to Houston, Texas. And so, my dad worked for Exxon, and so about every 5 years he would take a sort of a transfer position and move to a different place.
And how many siblings?
6 siblings. I'm the second oldest of 6, 5 boys, 2 girls. So,
And high school was where?
High school was half in Illinois and then half in Houston, Texas.
What high school?
In Klein High School in Houston. Yeah.
Klein?
Yes.
We used to play Klein Oak and Klein Forest.
Well, I hope we won. That's all I can say.
Usually did. I grew up in Katy. So.
Oh, okay, so right there. Okay. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Same district.
Yeah.
Football teams.
There we go. There we go.
Okay, so that's not necessarily the most gay-friendly city.
Houston?
Necessarily. I mean, I know there's a strong LGBT community. I mean, Houston had a lesbian mayor when I lived there, actually.
Oh, really?
Kathy Whitmire. But Texas is Texas.
Yeah, I mean, so, Houston was sort of where we moved there right around my 16th birthday, and that was sort of where I really discovered or, came to terms with my sexuality in a sort of more conscious and overt way. And I actually discovered a gay and lesbian youth group in downtown Houston that was sort of very instrumental in my coming out process and coming to terms with things. So it was a little bit of an interesting story because I was every year my family would take this big vacation to Utah because I have relatives who live nearby in Sandy, and so my mom would sort of like pack up all 7 kids in the van, and my dad would stay home and work, and my mom would drive 24 hours from Illinois or Houston. She would drive straight through in this stalwart Mormon pioneer fashion and get us all to Happy Valley in one piece. And so one summer I remember I couldn't go, and so I was home by myself, and I remember just opening the phone book to try to find a gay group, but this is 1993, and there was no internet yet. And so I just sort of opened the yellow pages to G for gay, like looking for, I don't know what I thought I was going to find, like the gay club, So obviously there was nothing of that sort. And I was like, well, maybe H, maybe maybe homo will be in there. So I flip to the H, and there's of course nothing, but there's this entry that says hatch, in all capital HATCH, and I was like, well, what maybe that. So I dial, just in this desperate attempt to try to find something. I dial the number, and you've reached the Houston Area Teen Coalition for Homosexuals.
Oh my gosh.
Please. And it was like, for a young Mormon who really believes that everything in your life is being directed and everything is happening for a reason, I was like, well, this is clearly Satan guiding me to this, right? It's not God, right? And so I, nervously fumble out this message to this machine, and then, someone kind of calls me back immediately, and I've never come out to anyone at this point. I've never said I'm gay to anyone. I did do that thing, which a lot of gay men have said that they did, and that is that one day I was standing in the mirror, and I sort of went from looking at, my pores of my face to see if they were, to then going like, looking into my eyes and being like, who am I? And that led me to then saying out loud, I'm gay, I'm a gay man. Out loud
to the mirror,
and I've heard
at age 16. Now, were you a believer in the church, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so talk a bit about your testimony at that point.
Well, so I really believed that the universe was exactly as it was presented to me by the gospel, by my parents. I had absolutely no doubt or inkling that there could be another truth. To me, the concept of absolute truth for all human beings was unquestionable. Like, the church was true. There was no ambiguity. There was no way the church was wrong. There was no way there was another faith paradigm that was acceptable. There was no way there wasn't a God. There was no way there wasn't an atonement. Everything was, in my mind at that age, my own homosexuality was an absolute betrayal of everything that I had learned about God.
You first started feeling attracted towards men at what age?
Oh, I have heard a few gay men say, like, I didn't know I was gay until I was 20. I mean, for me, I'm like, I swear to you, I was like 3, and I was like, I think that guy's cute. It's just like, it was, to me, there's no recollection of non-gay thought processes. I knew I was a very, very bossy, precocious, know-it-all child. That, I was the one with all the answers in Sunday school. I knew what everybody wanted me to say, and I said it. I was the, like, busybody child who was, like, helping the teacher erase the chalkboard before anyone else could even think to ask. So for me, like, it was just, there's no place for these feelings, but at the same time, they were so incredibly strong. When I discovered the Kinsey scale, I was like, well, there's just no, I'm not on this spectrum. I'm a 6, like, for sure. So there was never a moment where I was like, well, maybe I'm attracted to women, or maybe even from a very young age, I knew, even before I could name what it was, I knew it.
Did you ever try and figure out why? Did you ever try and, like, ask yourself, was it because of some of the reasons society often
Absolutely. Particularly that sort of line of questioning becomes more relevant when I sort of got to college, and I sort of, I came out to my ecclesiastical leader. I came out to my bishop before I came out to my parents.
After your mission?
Before my mission.
Okay.
In a sort of bizarre set of circumstances, I ended up telling my bishop that I was gay. And the reason that I told him that is because through this Houston group that I found and I went to, I sort of started seeing this boy that was in this group. And because the gospel's so important to me, I brought him to church with me. Ensue insanity. This is the crazy mindset. But even from the very beginning of my gay Mormon sort of adventure with myself, I feel that I was very programmed or very inclined to integrate my worlds. I was not one of those people that was like, my gay life's over here and my Mormon life's over here and I'm going to separate them. From the very beginning, I was like, I've got to find a way to, if this is going to work, I've got to find a way to marry these two worlds. And so what I realize now is that I basically started inventing my own version of Mormonism in my head to make that work.
Which ties into the Book of Mormon Musical, but we'll get to that.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. But so I brought this boy to church, and the bishop was like, like, who's this guy? Why are you, So the bishop called me in for a sort of random worthiness interview based on his discernment, So I go in and I talk to the bishop, and he's like, how is everything going? And I'm like, everything's great. It's great. Head exploding, And he was like, well, now, how are you doing with personal worthiness? And I was like, well, I'm great. What do everything's great. And he's like, let me be more specific. How are you doing with masturbation? Because, what every bishop wants to talk about is masturbation with a 16-year-old, right? So I said, I think I'm doing pretty well, You're
excelling. You were excelling.
I think I'm getting better, actually, yeah. Really progressing, and, my accuracy is high. So, he says, well, the reason I'm asking is because, often the sin of masturbation can lead to other sins. And I was just like, what? What other sins? And he says, well, the sin of masturbation can lead to homosexuality. And I was like, pause. I was like, I just want to. I had this moment, this very long Scorsese, stretched out, slow motion, in my head, falling, kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to say here, because this was sort of a pivotal moment for me to either hide my nature and hide my thoughts and versus being really honest and being like, I don't believe that what you're saying is true, and I think we should talk about this. And also sort of maybe feeling a little like I needed to educate this bishop lest he go on in this kind of thought process. And so I kind of, slow motion, figured out, I was like, I'm just going to be honest right now. And so I said, I think that's wrong. And he was like, what do you mean? Why would you say that? And I said, well, I just want to let you know that I have masturbated before, but I not for very long. And I'll tell you that I've been gay since I was a child. And my homosexuality certainly preceded my masturbation. And he just sort of sat there looking dumbfounded for a few minutes and took a minute to kind of recover, because I think, even though I brought my boyfriend to church and maybe he had some inkling, I don't think he was expecting me to make such a sort of honest and sort of presence of mind kind of a statement like that. And so, he was like, well, what do you mean? So anyway, we had this long conversation, and I had decided not to tell my parents about I had sort of.
So this is the first time you came out to anyone?
Pretty much.
Than yourself.
I kind of told this girl who lived in a faraway town, because if it went badly, I don't know if other people did this, but, it was this girl who lived in Illinois where I had lived previously, and I went and visited, and she was the first person I told, and I said to myself, if this blows up in my face, and she thinks I'm a terrible person, and she hates me, and she wants to spread this gossip to everyone, thank goodness Facebook didn't exist at the time, it's been a higher stakes, but, so I told her, and she was Christian, not Mormon, she was extremely loving and wonderful, and so he was basically the second person I had ever told, and of course I had no intention of telling him, but when someone says masturbation leads to homosexuality, I feel like it's your moral obligation to say something.
Right.
So
you hadn't told your parents yet.
I hadn't told my parents. So, and I had sort of decided not to because I just didn't want to let my parents down. My older brother, it was very clear at this point, he was a couple years older than me. It was very clear that he wasn't going on a mission. It was clear that he was sort of not going to be Mormon anymore. And so my parents were like really taking his difficulties with the church, or his, I guess, inability to perform up to the standards set forth by Mormon success paradigm, mission, BYU, getting on that marriage path, getting ready to mobilize those sperm to make more Mormon babies. I felt like I was sort of carrying my parents' their success as parents on my shoulders. And I certainly knew that my homosexuality would be a very large blow to their Mormon egos. And so I love my parents, I adore my parents. They were really good parents. They really care about me, and they very carefully and lovingly raised me. And I on my 6th birthday, I asked. My mom was like, what do you want? What should I tell Santa to bring you? And I said, I really want a Barbie because I love their hair. And my mom was like, I'm going to get him a Barbie. And somehow, like, my dad or somebody was like, I don't think you can get him that. I think that that's a bad idea. And my mom was like, he should get what he wants for Christmas. I'm going to give him what he wants. And so I can't say that my parents were ever progressive. I think they're very much by the Book of Mormon, very afraid to break the rules. Very much, I'll rephrase, better, very much obedience is the way to you have safety within the bounds the Lord has set, and that's where you should stay. And so that's my parents, particularly my mother's, MO. So I was trying to protect them from this, whole gay thing, because I didn't know what it meant yet, and I hoped that it wouldn't, I didn't want it to hurt them. Anyway, he was like, no, you should go home and tell them. I'm discerning that that's what you should do. And so so I went home that day and told my parents. And, of course, my parents' reaction was fine. And the reason my parents' reaction was fine is because I said, I'm gay. But don't worry, I'm going to be celibate for the rest of my life. And I'm never, ever, ever going to act on these feelings. So you have nothing to worry about. And and because I'm so awesome and I'm so obedient, God will probably bless me with enough heterosexuality to make a marriage work, and I'll probably still be able to give you Mormon offspring that numberless concourses of angels will be proud to welcome into the fold. So, so when you present it that way, they were more than fine with it. But so anyway, this sort of ecclesiastical, from the beginning, this sort of sense of integration, and my bishop at the time, my BYU applications has sort of already been, by the point we continued to counsel, I got accepted into BYU, and he said, I'm going to let you, I'm going to sign your ecclesiastical endorsement, and all I ask in return is that you see a BYU counselor, and kind of do some counseling, because I think you should be working with someone to help you. And it was never sort of overt or declared to me that I needed to change my sexuality. But of course, that's the inference. You got to try to change this. And so I know I'm just sort of like running here, but interrupt me if you want. But so when I got to BYU, the therapist that they set, that I was sort of set up with, I remember the BYU Counseling Center, where they did the counseling. It's now somewhere else, but at the time it was in the Spencer W. Kimball Tower, the Swicket. It's this big looming building over, just like Spencer W. Kimball's judgment, just looming over everything. And ironically, of course, Spencer W. Kimball is the author of this doctrine that masturbation leads to homosexuality. So I don't know, as I was sitting there filling out, what is your primary problem that you're here for the counseling center today? I just found it really ironic that I was sitting in Spencer W. Kimball's namesake, writing, well, I'm a gay man.
It's also a large phallic symbol in the middle of the
which I, for one, appreciated. I really appreciate it. Thank you. So anyway, my first day in this group, or my first day in therapy, I sit down and this counselor is, he basically looks like Spencer W. Kimball. I mean, he's this older guy, a couple years away from retiring, and he said, so what are your goals for therapy? Which is often one of the first questions the therapist will ask you. Why are you here? What are your goals for therapy? What would you like to accomplish? And I'm like, I'm at BYU. This is a George Orwell moment. Big Brother is watching. Well, of course, I would like to, ideally become a, healthier, more self-aware person, and I'd hopefully like to change my sexuality. I'm attracted to men, and of course, I, was programmed by the church to never say that I was gay because that's an identifier, whereas, so I was very much into, I have same-sex attraction, I'm attracted to men, of course, all these sort of temporary ways of describing this non-condition, it's not an orientation, it's just some sort of a temporary, all these things. So I said, I would like to change, and to my complete shock, this therapist who I know he retired from BYU, but I don't know if he's still doing any therapy or anything. But he said, we can work really hard on a lot of different areas of your life, and we're going to talk through how your same-sex attraction affects your church membership and how it affects. But I just want to let you know that I've been counseling gay men and women for 30 years, and I just want to let you know I've never seen anyone change. And I was like, what? I was floored. Because I just expected to get the hard line. Like, yes, we're going to get you out there throwing a football and,
chopping wood.
We're going to cut those highlights right out of your hair, and those frosted tips are just going to hit the floor, and you are going to be talking about tits before the night is over. Getting it, making it happen.
We just earned our explicit rating.
Thank you. I was going to say the P word, but I thought maybe that would be going too far. But when you live in New York, you don't know what's a swear word anymore, because
especially after being in the musical.
Correct. Yeah. Speaking of the musical, there's one of the sort of like funniest experiences during I'll get back to what I was saying in a minute, but one of the funniest experiences of being in the Book of Mormon on Broadway was having a musical director conducting the end of Hasadiga Ibawai, where they're like, "Fuck you, God in the cunt," and being like, "Can I really get a little more T on cunta?" Because you're just like it's like this is a totally normal, Meanwhile, the show that I did right before this one, or a couple shows before, is Mary Poppins, Chim chimney, in the cunta. It's just like, what world are we living in where this we're getting enunciation notes on how to say fuck you, God, in the eye, all that stuff. So anyway, you can cut all that out. I'm sure some of your audience doesn't want to hear it.
Not for this musical.
Well, that's true. Well, exactly. I mean, what my justification when I was still in the Mormon paradigm for occasionally watching rated R movies was, well, my life is rated R because it has adult themes. So I feel that, if my life is rated R, I can certainly go watch, whatever movie is rated R. That's on this. Anyway, justify is my middle name. So anyway, my sort of experience with the with the BYU group was very interesting because there was also I had individual sessions, and he said, I'd like to invite you to be part of our group our group therapy. There's, I have a group of other men struggling with this issue. And, the only thing we ask is that you sign this rider that, you promise that you won't have sex with anyone in the group. And I said, oh, that's so unusual. Is that something that, and he was like, well, the only way I could get BYU to agree to have this group was to, promise that everyone would sign this rider, because of course a rider is going to stop two men from getting it on if they're really wanting to. Anyway, it's very, if the honor code's not stopping them, I don't know why signing an extra rider is going to help. But I, for one, didn't have sex with anyone in the group, so I would just like to say
Congratulations.
that. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I wasn't attracted to anyone in the group, but that doesn't matter, right? Anyway, it was very formative because I had, I met a bunch of other gay people. I met a bunch of other Mormons struggling with this. I think one of the biggest factors for a young gay Mormon is the feeling of isolation. I'm the only one. There's no one else like me. There are no other gay Mormons out there, and there's no one ahead of me whose experience I can draw from, and there are no voices. At the time, there were no Mormon voices, gay Mormon voices out there.
Just Carolyn Pearson, right?
Well, yeah, and even Carolyn Pearson at the time, No More Goodbyes hadn't come out yet, and so
in '93.
No More Goodbyes was the one.
Oh, right. Sorry.
Yeah, and I wasn't.
Goodbye, I Love You had come out.
Goodbye, I
but not
Love
No
You,
More Goodbyes.
which I hadn't read because that wasn't, the internet didn't exist, and I had no way of knowing that book existed.
Goodbye, I Love You.
Yes.
Okay.
So, I discovered that sort of way later, and so there was, as far as I knew, there was no information, and
There was Evergreen, though, right?
there was Evergreen, and I found that, in my own research into Evergreen, it just didn't seem like a good fit for where I was in life. I was also, at the time, I was very set on going on a mission. And so all my decisions were based on that. And again, I think that was like, I've got to give this to my parents because my older brother did not go on a mission. By this point, he's completely sort of separated himself from the church. And, I'm looking at all my younger brothers going, well, if I don't go on a mission, then maybe they won't too, and that will be sort of on my conscience. And I legitimately wanted to go on a mission. I felt like I wanted to. Of course, as I look back, it's hard to distinguish. I think a lot of Mormons can relate with this feeling, but it's hard to distinguish your own wishes from the wishes you've been programmed to have, because what's the difference, And to take a song from Turn It Off Like a Light Switch, it's like, if you're having a feeling that doesn't comply with what you should be feeling, well, that feeling, we just sort of turn it off. We're not going to pay any attention to the man behind the curtain over there. You just, anything you have, anything that you feel that sort of promotes the gospel's agenda for you, that's a good feeling, and that's an appropriate feeling, and that's where we're going to, and I just, all those, gay analogies that are like, you've got this tree and you've got that tree, and you should water the tree that is going to sprout into the gospel's fruit, and the tree over here that's going to sprout into all the gay fruits. There's a lot of gay fruit out there. Exactly. You're not going to water that tree. So it's all about what you give your attention to. And so, of course, you're having all these conflicting emotions and these conflicting feelings, but you just say, I'm going to put my attention here. And so for me, a mission was non-negotiable. And so I had this really, really bizarre, very individualized version of my own pre-mission morality and what I felt comfortable in terms of exploring my sexuality. For instance, I was willing to make out with a guy so in BYU I met all these people, and of course the minute you sort of start meeting a few gay people, you realize that there's this just big underground of homosexuality.
At BYU?
What? At BYU? No, literally. And there was, Oh, this is just one of my favorite. This was one of my favorite things in the history of like gay Mormondom is, all of the kids at BYU would go to this gay club called the Sun. Does anyone remember the Sun? No? Anyone? The Sun was fabulous. The Sun, it was just this like seedy little gay, and it was like right next to, what's it called where the Utah Jazz play? I'm not that into sports.
Delta
but,
Center,
yes.
Energy Solutions. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So it was like right there. And so, we would drive there, and of course I was 18 or, before my mission, and so I couldn't get in, and so but there was this like foolproof way of jumping over this back wall and climbing over this roof and getting into the club, and then, you're in the club, it's so fun. So, so anyway, we would all go to the club, and then, there was was it a tornado or a hurricane that came through? Tornado. And it destroyed the Sun. And it was like, well, God destroyed the Sun, And so we jump over we jump over the roof, we go into the Sun, and of course, the minute I get inside, I start talking to this returned missionary, this gay returned missionary, about going on a mission in the middle of the gay club. And it's like, do you believe in life after love? And I'm like, I just really want to go on a mission. And so, so he says, well, but why would you go on a mission? You already know you're gay. He was like, I just don't understand why you would want to do this. And I said, well, I really want to go. I think it's, and he's like, well, he really tried to talk me out of it. He was like, I don't see any reason for you to do this because you're not going to end up in the church. You're going to end up out of the church. Like everybody else that's gay, you kind of figure out that it's not going to work. And I was like, well, I think it is going to work for me. I think I can make it work. And he was like, okay, well, at least if you decide to go on a mission, please know that it's not going to change your sexuality. At least know that. God is not going to make you straight because you go and baptize a bunch of people for the Mormon Church.
He was trying to save you heartbreak and
he
a lot of
was.
time.
Yeah, he was. He was like, at least know that that's not going to be the result of it. And if you want to go, go. And go for the merit of going and having this experience and maturing and growing up and learning things about yourself, but do not expect to change your sexuality. And so, as I submitted my papers and as I started my mission and as I went through the Missionary Training Center and, started having this experience of being a missionary, it was always in the back of my mind that, this is not going to change you. You're going to, and I knew that I was going to have to deal with all of these questions about my sexuality when I got home. But there's something so interesting about, I think there's something so interesting about this mission thing for young Mormon men because in a way, I was very shielded from having to really consider how I was going to handle my homosexuality and how I was going to handle my choices of how I was going to be in the church. Because when you've got 2 years of a mission, it's just like this huge buffer to like real life and making decisions about how, because it's all great in theory, and I remember having a sort of really, really heated argument with this girl at BYU. She didn't go to BYU, but she went to, Utah Valley, at the time Utah Valley State College. And, I think I mentioned, well, yeah, one day I would like to get married, and I think that God's gonna provide a ram in the thicket for me to sacrifice it's funny because I really actually use that analogy, not grasping the sort of like irony of like the ram's gonna get stabbed. God will provide a ram in the thicket for me to marry, and so. And she was like, well, yeah, that's all fine for you. You know what you're dealing with, and you know that you're sacrificing your own ability to be totally sexually and emotionally invested in a relationship. But what about the woman you marry? And what about what you're asking her to give up? And I felt really ashamed of myself because I had never considered what her life would be like. I had only considered my own outcomes and my own sacrifices and what I would be giving up. And it's one thing to give up your own sexual fulfillment, and it's one thing to be giving up your own sort of ability to be fully authentic in a relationship. But it's another thing to inflict that upon someone else who, no matter how much you explain, even if you do, in the best case scenario, really explain, I'm not attracted to you, I'm attracted to men. However, I want to marry you because that's what God wants me to do, and I'm going to be a great husband, and I'm going to be a great father, and I promise you I'm never going to, have any extramarital relationships. I will probably never be attracted to you the way that you deserve. But I promise you I'll have sex with you, and I will make sure to meet your sexual needs as much as possible, and I will fulfill my husbandly duties. I mean, you can explain this stuff till you're blue in the face, and a faithful Mormon girl is going to be like, I totally understand. You're absolutely going to change the minute you have sex with me. You're going to feel differently. And that is a story I have seen play out again and again and again and again, and sort of played out for me in my last sort of run at Mormonism. And so I'm sort of skipping ahead here, but in 2004 I got my first Broadway show, which ironically was I was a drag queen in La Cage aux Folles, the Broadway revival of La Cage aux Folles. Was my Broadway debut, and so I was still TBM, and I was still wearing my garments, and I was still very much invested in the idea that even though I'd come out to everyone in my family, everyone knew that I was gay. I was constantly talking about homosexuality and Mormonism. I woke up in the morning and it was basically like buttering my bread, the homosexual Mormon plight. I mean, it's really, I talked about it, my cousin Eric is here tonight as well, and he can speak to this as well. It's just that, it was such an obsession, and I know a lot of other gay and lesbian Mormons can relate to this. It's just like everything you think about is this struggle and this kind of these two sides of how you're going to figure this out. And so I met this girl at church, and I saw her, and she was a very pretty girl, and I was like, she's really pretty. I think she's really pretty. Wow, this must be some version of heterosexual feelings, right? I notice her beauty. That's, of course, everything's like this extrapolation of, so I go up to her and I ask her out and I get her number and we go out. And, when is a good time to spring on someone you're dating that you're gay and that you want to marry her anyway? There's just never a good time to say, I'm gay and I'm never going to be attracted to you or really love you, but I would love to marry you and take you to the celestial kingdom with me. So, I thought 3 dates was probably a good amount of time. Just trying to, it's like telling someone you have herpes. When do you bring that up? Right away. So, anyway, so around our third or fourth date, I said, look, I want to talk to you about something kind of serious, and she said, okay. And I said, you may or may not have noticed or heard this. And she happened to be a dancer, and so she, had exposure to gay men, as all dancers do. And so I said, I struggle with same-sex attraction, and but I want you to know I'm very committed to the gospel, and I am committed to not living a gay lifestyle, whatever a gay lifestyle is, and I just want you to have all the information about my situation and what I'm dealing with, and I want to give you an out if you don't want to date me. This is not for everyone, and I realize that I'm putting you in a little bit of a difficult situation, but I wanted to tell you this early on so that you could kind of date someone else if you feel like this isn't something you want to do. And like many Mormons, when the wheel is presented, you put your shoulder to it, right? So she was like, well, this sounds like something that, it's a challenge, and it sounds like a challenge we could face together, and maybe it'll bring us closer to really face it. You know what I mean? This is tale as old as time, true as it could be. I mean, this is like, in some ways, I think it's a heterosexual Mormon woman's fantasy of like, I will save him. I will save him from a life of AIDS, loneliness, spiritual death, sterility. I'm going to give him posterity. I'm going to show him the love of a woman, and that is going to heal what is wrong with him in a profound way. And this is my chance to reflect the Savior's love to someone who needs the atonement more than anybody. And I'm gonna be that window to his love. I'm gonna be that vessel, and I'm gonna be part of saving him. I think that's a very attractive package for a lot of heterosexual Mormon women, and they're kind of like, this is my chance to prove my mettle and see what I'm made of. And this is my, especially someone who hasn't necessarily faced a lot of personal challenges. They're like, yeah, I'll pick this up. I'll do it. So we're dating. We're dating. We're going along in our relationship, and we're hitting the 3-month mark. When you need to propose, right? And I remember, we were sort of on this diverging mental pathway, because I was starting to feel anxious and I have a very, very good, one of my closest friends from BYU who I met in this gay group that I was in at BYU. He married a woman. He married a woman who was his best friend for 10 years. She was as close to an ideal mixed orientation marriage scenario as I can imagine, because she wasn't introduced to homosexuality from knowing him. They had been friends for 10 years. She knew all his gay friends. She knew what a gay man is. She knew what marrying a gay man would mean, or I think, at least at the time, she thought she understood all of the ramifications of what marrying a gay man would be. And so, I had a very close friend in this sort of situation, and as I began to really consider and have some empathy for this person who I had come to really care about in this 3-month period of time, I just realized that I could never give her what I felt she deserved. And that's a really weird thing to say, to look at someone and be like, I love you enough to tell you that I know that I can't make this happen for you. I cannot give you. And I know that I want to be with someone who is attracted to me, genuinely attracted to me, and she was genuinely attracted to me. She was very attracted to me, and she made that very clear, and she was very demonstrative. And I could be demonstrative back, but I wasn't feeling it, and she knew I wasn't feeling it, but I think she wanted to stay the course. And so I remember we sort of, had this big conversation, and she was like, I think we should take this to the next level. And it was that exact moment where I was like, I think we should end. I think we should end this. And I remember my mom came to New York, and I introduced her to my mom, and I was like, this is a girl I'm dating. I'm really thinking about moving to the next level. And my mom, I think, was very caught in this, well, of course I want you to be married. And of course I want you to have all the blessings of the gospel. But my mom wasn't excited about it. She didn't seem like, oh, this is wonderful, you found this person, this is going to be so great for you. She was like, okay, well, I think that if you want to do this, then you can do it. And I was so confused. I was like, I'm doing this for you, basically, like a lot of it, to kind of continue to prop up your success as a parent, because, as a parent, if you can get a child to, based on your teaching of Mormonism to them, if you can get that child to be celibate and agree to spend their life alone, then you have taught them Mormonism, right? I mean, you have succeeded in convincing them that if they're willing to sacrifice their own humanity on that level to say, I will be alone. I will never know the joy of love. I will never know the joy of sexual connection. I'm willing to sacrifice that for the gospel. That's how true the gospel is. I mean, what better success as a parent can you feel than being like, wow, my child is willing to totally make themselves miserable to follow the gospel. If that's not Mormonism, I don't know what is. You know? So I expected to get a little more, praise from my mom on this, and she didn't give me any, and that sort of gave me pause. I was like, well, maybe she's not feeling that great about this either, and maybe I'm not either. And anyway, I ended things with this girl, and then my next move was to buy No Man Knows My History, and I know that a lot of your readers have, a big part of their departure from the gospel is more of an intellectual journey out of the woods than an emotional one. Because I think as a Mormon, it's really hard to trust your emotions because your emotions have been so manipulated by what you should be feeling. And the whole concept of like, well, you're not ready to bear your testimony yet, but go up and bear your testimony anyway, because that's how you find out that it's true, by telling people it's true before you even know it, which is a whole kind of psychological conundrum of its own. But for me, it fell apart very, very, very quickly after I read that book. I kind of didn't need a lot more than that, which surprised me, because I thought that it would be much more difficult to get my mind out of this locked-in paradigm. And I hadn't seriously contemplated suicide, but I thought about death frequently because I was so stressed out living in this world of conflict, and I couldn't get out of the conflict. And I wasn't enjoying being in the church because there was no real future for me in the church, and particularly when this relationship with this girl ended. Because here I have this person. I've told her what's going on. I've been totally honest. I have shared with her what I consider to be the ramifications of marrying a gay man. I've been as honest with her as I can be. She wants to go forward with it. I'm not being deceptive. I'm telling the truth. She wants to move forward. She wants to marry me. And if that doesn't feel right, then what else am I supposed to do? There's nothing else to do. Like, that should have felt right. If the church was right about this topic and right about my path on what I'm supposed to accomplish on earth, then that should have felt right. There should have been some sort of angelic choir supporting me as I, sang my solo out front. And there was nothing. It was this, again, like that first kiss I had with the girl, this feeling of emptiness and kind of like, why do I feel so drained of my own vitality? Why do I feel so lost? And so, I remember, and I mentioned this before, but I think it's something that a lot of maybe, even people who aren't gay, who are struggling with their Mormon, their faith and how they're not feeling good in the church. I remember that, a lot of people are afraid of flying. They're like, oh, what if the plane crashes? It's so scary. You're up so high. I swear this is not an exaggeration. Every time a plane would take off, I'd be like, oh, if this plane crashed, that'd be okay. I mean, if we went down in a flaming fireball, that would be okay. It'd be a little bit of a relief for me because I'm tired, And here I am, a 23 or 24-year-old man feeling exhausted by my life and carrying these two worlds. And the crux of it all is that I'm unhappy in the church, but I would be just as unhappy if I left the church. Because without the gospel, I'm nothing. Without the gospel, I have no access to the Holy Ghost, which is the source of all my joy, which is the source of all my inspiration, and the source of all my wonderful qualities. And, it's just this terrible catch-22 to be in this world where you have no hope. You have no choices. You can't stay in the church because it sucks, and you can't leave the church because that sucks too. So you're just, it sucks. There's no way out of it. So I was really caught in that. And I think a big part of my faith was really believing that life outside the church would leave me unhappy, would leave me alone, and I wouldn't have any of my good qualities. And of course, there's that whole weird ward manipulation thing of like, oh, well, she lost all the light in her countenance after she left the church. I saw her and the bags under her eyes were so big. If she had the spirit, those bags would have been way smaller and they would have been Louis Vuitton, like, it's just like, it's that weird thing. And I remember, after I read No Man Knows My History and I'm sort of moving out of the church, I remember my mom, she threw that at me. That this was, my dad sort of was like, it's okay, my dad's reaction to me wanting to leave the church was, you seem like a pretty smart person to me, and if you feel like this is what you need to do, you've obviously thought it through. And I don't think you've made this decision lightly. You told us you were gay almost 10 years ago. By this point, I was, 20, 27, 28. And he was like, you gave it a try. You did your best. You tried to make it work. You dated that girl. You didn't feel good about it. This might be a better decision for you. And I think we should just support you. And my mom was like, over my dead body, And I think she felt like my blood and sins were going to be on her head if she didn't do everything she could. So she pulled out the "you've lost all the light in your countenance." She pulled out the, the temple. You're now going to be in Satan's power because you haven't upheld the covenants that you made in the temple in this day. And all I'm thinking about is Michael Ballum's dramatic exit with that stick. The fling of the cape, and I'm just like, oh.
He's kind of a drama queen, isn't he?
Oh, absolutely.
He's kind of a diva. Michael Ballum was a diva.
And of course, Satan's a really big diva. I mean, Satan's the biggest diva there is, Everything's red, please, queen. You got minions all over around you. Anyway, so I don't know. Where do we want to?
No, it's good. So your mom gave you a hard time, but ultimately, what'd you do?
So this was a really big turning point for me in my relationship with my parents, and especially my mom, because what occurred to me was that in my attempt to soften the blow of my leaving the church and my decision to start to alienate myself from the church, or my favorite, become disaffected, which is, I don't know if this is what they're still writing on the excommunication letters, but it's apparent that you have become disaffected with the Mormon church. In the process of trying to sort of ease the blow of this, because this was a much harder pill for them to swallow than my homosexuality, because of course my homosexuality is a non-issue if I'm going to stay in the church, right? Who cares? You're going to be celibate for the rest of your life. You're going to follow the commandments. You're not going to be this, mark on our posterity. You're not going to break up our eternal family. Who cares that you're gay? Fabulous. You can help us decorate the living room. It needs a touch up, So it occurred to me that in trying to protect them from what would ultimately be a big blow to their Mormon self-esteem, I realized what I was doing was really apologizing for my departure from the church, and what it looked like, what I realized that I was conveying to them was confusion, distress, and crying for help, and what I felt inside was certainty. I knew that I needed to finish my relationship with the church. I knew I needed to leave the church. I knew it was an unhealthy environment for me. I had seen, I'd started to realize by talking to like normal people that not everybody thinks about death when a plane goes up in the air. Who knew? I was like, I'm wishing for my own death. That's not good. And then during this time period, I had a young man from my home ward who reached out to me and said, I'm at BYU. I have a group of friends who we're all gay, and we're trying to find our way through this conundrum of gay Mormonism. And you seem like you're kind of making your way, and I wondered if I could ask for your advice on a couple of different things, and could we talk on the phone? And I said, yes, of course we can talk on the phone. When would you like to talk? And he said, cool, can we talk on Sunday? And it was a Thursday, and so I said, great. And so I call him on Sunday, and he says, I'm sorry, I have a really sore throat, and I'm very sick today. Do you mind? Can we talk next Sunday instead? And and I said, of course, I'll call you next Sunday. And on the following Thursday, I got an email that said, if you're receiving this email, you were listed in Alan's contacts, and he has taken his life. And of course, this had an incredible impact on me. And I just thought, should I have tried to keep him on the phone on Sunday and said, no, let's talk today. It's that thing where you feel sort of like I had this chance to help someone, and because of circumstances you couldn't help them, and that he couldn't wait 3 more days to or call me or say, I know it's not Sunday yet, but I really want to talk, that he would go in his garage and turn on a car and end his life rather than try to figure out another way. And so I was already on my way with my parents, telling them about my departure from the church. And I was already, but this for me was a solidifying experience. And I really came to terms with something that helped me a lot, and that was the idea of, if you have to make a choice between leaving the church or leaving the earth by your own hand, leaving the church is the better option. Whatever the consequences of that are, whatever the consequences of leaving the church may bring in your life, the unknown, damnation, God's condemnation, parental disapproval, societal rejection, whatever consequences may come about, it's still, even if you end up living your life in outer darkness for eternity, at least stay on earth. Don't stay here and figure it out, work it out, try to do something. And so my mom and I were already sort of in talks, and she was throwing the countenance loss of my light in my countenance, and one of the things she said was, every good quality that you have came from the church, and you're throwing that all back in the church's face. And how can you walk away? How can you walk away from this? This is the eternal gospel of Jesus Christ, and you are walking away from it. I mean, it's the pinnacle of what every Mormon parent feels. I can't say many Mormon parents feel when their child is leaving the church. Everything good that you ever experienced came from the gospel, and you have received the fruit of that tree, and it was most sweet above all that is sweet, and you've eaten of that tree, and now you're walking away and jumping into the river of filthy water, and here you are, and so my mom and I were already kind of discussing all of this, and after Alan committed suicide, I said, Mom, my mom was still in Houston at the time. That's where his family was living. And she said, I went to Alan's funeral. And I said, well, what did they say? And she said, well, they said that he was struggling with depression. And that was, and I said, well, Mom, Alan was gay. Alan was gay. And she was like, oh, I don't know. I think he was just depressed. And I said, Mom, I had email exchanges with him. I've explained this to you. He told me he's gay, he was struggling, we were going to have a phone conversation. And she said, well, he was probably just really depressed. And I was like, Mom, why do you think he was depressed? I was like, when are you going to get it? I was like, is it going to take me dying for you to get it through your head that this is a violent atmosphere for a gay person to be in? This is a violent atmosphere. People are killing themselves. People are dying. And no one is saying, we care about these lives. These lives matter. Let's stop these people from doing violence to themselves. Let's say something that helps them to want to live. This is not fair. They shouldn't be dying. But, I don't know, maybe there's this feeling that it's collateral damage, the war between good and evil goes on, and sometimes you lose a few lives in the process. And maybe these are just collateral damage. And at this point, I was very mobilized in my own feeling of I matter, and I matter, and my life matters, and I'm not going to be cast aside for any philosophy or any faith paradigm. I don't know if it's true. I don't know if it's false. I don't know if there is a God. I don't know if there isn't a God. But what I know is that I'm not going to be collateral damage to some faith paradigm that I can't even back up. That all I know is that I've been told that I would feel a certain way, and that way will tell me that gospel paradigm is true. I was like, something that's causing me to want to die can't be good for me. Here I am drinking poison every day, and the poison is making me die. And I'm saying, no, this poison is the nectar of life. But I'm dying, and I know that I'm dying. That's eventually you say, I don't care if this is the nectar of life. It's killing me. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop drinking it. And so, I think, Alan's death was something that made me say, I want to live, and I want to spend the rest of my life doing what I can to make sure other people don't die too. And I'm certainly not going to die from this. I'm not going to go down the road of thinking that I should die anymore. And I want to live, and I want to be here, and I want to do what I can to help. So what I realized with my parents was that they needed me to be the adult. They needed me to be a leader. And that was, that's an unfamiliar, uncharted territory, I think, for many Mormons, because we're used to being guided by people who have answers, and we're not used to making decisions and having to wield our own machete and shoot, through the forest ourselves. The path is clear. The path is straight, and we should stay on it, and it's laid out in front of us. And so, when I realized that what I was unintentionally doing was saying, "Help me, mom. I'm afraid. I'm lost. I'm scared." What I was trying to do was say, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry that this hurts you." But what she was hearing was, "Help me, help me." And of course, she was throwing me the one life raft she had. That's the gospel. And she was throwing it hard. She was throwing the scriptures hard at me. And so when I realized that, I said to myself, "Oh, she just needs me to be the grown-up here and say, 'Mom, I love you. I am leaving the church. And the reason I'm leaving the church isn't because I hate Mormonism or because I hate you and Dad, or I think that it was wrong of you to raise me Mormon. I love what I learned in the church. I love the opportunities for development it gave me. I'm grateful, but I don't believe in it anymore. I think it's a violent place for me to be. I have evidence of that violence from myself and from my life experience, and I need to leave. And what I need for you to do is to love me. I need you to love me. And if you can't love everything about me, then pick the things about me that you love and love those and ignore the rest," which is exactly what I had to do with all the stuff in Mormonism that I didn't like, right? I'm like, you're trained for this, okay? Just ignore the stuff that you don't like and focus on the things that you do. And, and there it is. And so it took a couple of years of patience and where I have to give my mom major credit, major credit, is that she never turned her back on me. She never said, "I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to have this discussion with you." She always said, I want to know what you're thinking. I want to know what books you're reading. After I read No More Goodbyes by Carolyn Pearson, which was right during this same time, Alan's suicide, all of these other things, me changing my course, I stopped attending church, and realized that I really liked Sunday brunch much more than Sunday school. And I liked a boozy Sunday brunch more than I liked Sunday school. So anyway, so she said, what are you reading? And I said, I'm reading this book by Carolyn Pearson. And my mom loved Carolyn Pearson's poems, and she loved My Turn on Earth and all these things. And so I said, well, Carolyn Pearson's written this book, and why don't you read it? And she read the book, and she was like, I don't like what this book is saying. And I said, well, I really do. This book is making me feel like I want to live my life and not die. And she was like, well, I think this is a dangerous message. I love the word dangerous in the Mormon paradigm, The spiritual crocodiles. Does anyone remember the seminary video about, did you ever see the spiritual crocodiles video? So, it's the young ones that get chomped by the spiritual crocodiles. And so anyway, my mom didn't like that book, but she read it. And she talked with me about it. And then, a year passed, and I was before I met Matt, my current boyfriend. I was in another relationship, and she didn't want us to stay at her house. She didn't feel comfortable having us stay there together. And I didn't say, "F you, Mom. We're never going to come back again." I said, "Okay, well, your loss. We'll get a hotel, and I'll try again in a year, And so I'm really passionate about how gay people or people struggling with their faith that are straight, that are struggling with Mormonism and considering getting out of the church. I feel really strongly about the way that it can go very, very well and the way that it can go very wrong. And I'm really passionate about, the person leaving the church being extremely patient with the people in their lives who are hurt or who are angry or who slam the door in their face. I wish that everyone who was leaving the church would say, okay, I'll try again in a year, or I'll try again in 6 months. I am not going to turn my back on these people. I'm going to give them some time. I'm going to show them all the love that I wish they would show me. That doesn't mean that you turn the other cheek and say, slap me again. Maybe you walk away from the relationship for a while and say, I'll try again in a year. And I really feel that it's, the responsibility of the people. I really wish that Mormons and believing Mormons would accept people's departure from the church with as much grace, with as much love, with as much dignity, with as much even excitement and happiness as they accept someone's baptism into the church. I wish there was a way for Mormons to say, you don't want to be here anymore. If you don't feel that this is the right place for you, we love you and we want you to be happy. And not so that that person will have a good impression of Mormons so they'll come back again in a year. Not to set a good example, but because if you really love someone, you're willing to let them go. You're willing to let them do what they feel is best, even if you think it's a mistake. They're an adult and they should be given the right to walk away from the church with your blessing. And the whole concept of apostasy and the whole concept of people being like, well, you're going to feel awful and you're going to die alone and you're never going to be, which is, this just hatred, and when someone joins the church and someone's baptized and they're in their beautiful white clothes and, a deacon's baptizing them, it's like everyone's crying and here you are leaving the church and people are angry at you. They're angry at you for leaving the church. I feel like, where's the agency? Someone should have the right to walk away and have people be like, if this is what you feel is best for your life, we love you. And I didn't just love you because you were a Mormon. I didn't love you because you believed the same things. I loved you because I love you. That what you do and believe doesn't matter. And so I feel like the person who's leaving the church needs to be very patient, because a lot of times we're already up to here by the time we want to leave the church. And anybody who says, well, now have you really thought about, we're like, F you, you're not supporting me, you're not loving me, slam, because we've already put up with so much and we didn't say anything, and I think that where I like to be and where I like to consider my relationship with the church is and with my family, because I have most of my family is still in the church, and I have a great deal of love for the people who are in my family who are in the church. I feel that they have a great deal of love and compassion for me. I feel like they accept me as a full-fledged, non-marginalized citizen in the family. I feel like I'm given equal say, and I wish that other people who are leaving the church and other families who are watching their loved one leave the church could show patience and love, and that it could be a healing process that brings people together instead of tears people apart.